Oh, good morning. I'm like, I don't know, 30 seconds late. It's just one of those days where I'm just, I'm behind on everything. If you could have been in my kitchen a couple minutes ago to me running around, my hair's a wreck, I'm a wreck, but I'm here, and that's what matters. And you're here too. So, good morning, interwebs. I hope you're all having a good day. It's Wednesday. For those of you who've forgotten what day it is, today is Wednesday. It's hump day. So there is that. I'm going to give you a treat today. I'm going to read not one, not two, but three chapters for you today because one of them's kind of short. So anyway, today's digital resource has been much on my mind. I wanted it, this is a good time to catch up on your reading. Many of you are at home, and I want to, if you're looking for books, I want you to consider purchasing your books if that's an option for you. I know many people right now need to rely on their libraries. If you've lost your job, I get it. But those of us who, have a more stable income, really, we need to help each other. And I would love it if you would go to bookshop.org and get your books, consider getting your books there. They can't give you as good a deal as Amazon. They can't. But it will help support independent booksellers and it will help support writers. And I really encourage you, especially, I just feel for my fellow writers right now who have had a book coming out in this time. We work very hard, a year or two or more to have a book come out. And we really only have about 3 weeks for that book to make it or not make it normally. So this is tough, and this is our income for the whole year. And this is not something authors talk about very much because we don't want you to think we're not successful. So authors don't talk about this. But the average full-time writer, that's their full-time gig, in the United States of America makes about $20,000 a year. So none of us go into this because you want to get rich. If you are thinking you want to be a writer because you want to get really wealthy, seriously, choose any other profession. I urge you. So this is a great time. If you can support writers, especially those writers who've had a book come out during this time, and get it from bookshop.org, you'd be like three majorly wonderful things happening at the same time. You'd get a great book. You would help support a starving artist. And you would help support your local independent bookstore. So that's all a good thing. So I urge you to check that out today. All right, here we are. I feel like I need to move a little bit. There we are, a single thread. I'm a little goofy today. I don't know what's going on with me. Maybe I didn't have, either I had not enough coffee or too much coffee. Let's get started. I hate it when people blather on, don't you? Yes. We are in chapter 18, my friends. Abigail Burgess Wynn. You had Thanksgiving dinner at the shelter? The incredulous look on Franklin's face was more than a little insulting. Yes, I snapped. Is that so surprising? Yes, he said, grinning widely. It is. Oh, stop it, Franklin. I don't know why I ever tell you anything. No matter what I do, you find a way to make fun of it. Sorry, I need to settle down. Sorry. Okay. Not without an effort. Franklin wiped the smile from his face. I apologize, Abigail. I wasn't mocking you. Quite the opposite. It's just hard to picture you standing behind a steam table doling out plates of mashed potatoes and gravy. Tell me. He leaned across the desk, making the rusty springs of his leather barrister chair squeak. Did they make you wear one of those hairnets? Shut up, Franklin, I said irritably, and get your chair oiled. It sounds like nails on a chalkboard. Better yet, buy a new one. Surely I pay you enough so you don't have to keep using that same broken-down desk chair you've had since you passed the bar. You do, but I like this chair. It took me 10 years to get it just to get it broken in, and I have no intention of replacing it. However, if it makes you happy, I will get the springs oiled. Now, is there anything else I can do for you today, Abigail, or did you just come in to offer me decorating advice? Hey, Mom, would you do me a favor and turn on some of the overhead lights? I am having a hard time seeing the words. Thank you. This is a very professional operation, you can see. There's my production staff, Wave production staff. Thank you. All right, sorry, we'll get back to it. Let's see. Let's go back. What can I do for you today, Abigail? Or did you just come to thank you, to offer me decorating advice? He smiled, and his eyes twinkled mischievously. He was always so terribly pleased with himself, I thought. He was even older than I was, but at that moment he looked positively boyish, like the illustration of Puck that I'd seen in a volume of Mr. Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. I scowled at him, but not wholeheartedly. Of course I wanted something. I was trying to tell you that when you interrupted. Do you think I've nothing better to do with my time than hang about your office? Franklin nodded. It's true. I've tried to call you several times recently, but you're never home. Hilda said you've been spending a lot of time helping out at the shelter. Is that right? Hilda, I sighed. Hilda has been my housekeeper for 20 years, and no matter how many times I tell her to just take a message and tell people I'll get back to them, but not to tell them where I've gone, she doesn't listen. I guess you can teach an old dog new tricks. Can't teach an old dog new tricks. No matter. I've been spending more time at the shelter recently. That's why I've come to see you about. I cleared my throat and sat up straighter in my chair before beginning. I've been thinking recently about my money and how I spend it. Franklin leaned back in his chair, frowned, and making a tent of his clasped hands and two raised fingers, rested his fingertips against his lips. It was the thinking pose he struck whenever he was nervous about what I was going to say next. I have about $90 million. Is that correct? Yes, Franklin said, his fingers partially blocking his mouth. If you're discussing fairly liquid assets, that's about right. Of course, if you count your various property holdings, the figure is substantially higher. He paused, waiting to hear what I would say next. And currently we give away about $8 million annually to various charities. Is that right? Franklin nodded again. Very good. Well, I would like to increase our level of giving substantially. And I would like to become more involved in the deciding where the money will go and what will be done with it. I see, Franklin said, lowering his hands. That's fine. What did you have in mind? What organizations are you interested in, and how much would you like to donate? He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and took a pen so he could take notes. All of it. Franklin was silent. Don't look so stunned. I haven't lost my mind. I don't mean you have to give it away immediately, but I've been thinking long and hard about this. By the time I die, I'd like to make sure that almost all of my assets have been donated to worthy causes, things that can do some real good, and I want to be involved in those decisions, not just sign the checks. You mean you'd like to join some more boards? Yes, that can be arranged, Abby, but your schedule is already awfully busy. I don't see how you'd... No more boards. Heavens no. I'm on too many as it is. In fact, right after Christmas, I am going to make a list of all the boards I am currently on and cut the number by half. I'm going to rotate off the ones that I've joined for social reasons or whose missions I'm not that passionate about. Also, those whose board members seem more committed to hearing the sound of their own voices than actually doing good work. Though, I said, thinking of Ted Carney, in cases where the cause is good but the board is weak, I'm planning on organizing a few purges, trying to fill up the vacancies with fresh, eager talent that actually wants to make a difference. Hopefully, after a while, the dead wood will either sprout new life or resign. By this time, Franklin was leaning over the legal pad, scribbling furiously while I talked. So you want to be on fewer boards, but more active in the remaining organizations. Is that right? Yes, I confirmed, pleased that he understood what I was reaching for. I'll continue to support the arts, the various libraries, and community organizations at the same levels I always have. But I would like to increase my focus on charities that deal with poverty, especially those that help children. With the right kind of emphasis, I believe we can really make a difference, a lasting difference in the lives of children all over the state, I continued excitedly, and I want to make actual visits to the programs and organizations I'm supporting. Since I began volunteering at the shelter, really meeting the people and learning about their needs and problems, I've realized you've got to get in the trenches if you want to win the war. You're an old military man, Franklin, you know that. 6 years in the National Guard, it's how I paid for law school. Never saw action, though. I flew a desk. He looked up briefly, his pen poised over the pad of yellow paper. Go on. Well, as I said, I want to get more personally involved. There's just no reason in a community as well off as ours that so many poor people should be suffering. I think it's because people who are well off just don't want to acknowledge the problems that are all around them. It's disgraceful. You know, when the rich finally meet the poor face to face, then poverty will cease to exist, I said, and thumped the top of Franklin's desk to emphasize my point before going on. Now, we'll need to plan it out so I can live comfortably, not lavishly, but comfortably to the end of my life. But if my last dollar goes to pay for my headstone and there's nothing left after, then I'd say we have done our jobs properly. All this talking was making my throat dry. I poured myself some water from the pitcher on Franklin's desk and took a sip before going on. Except for whatever bequests I leave in my will, of course. Speaking of which, don't you think it's time we update the will? I want to leave something for Liza and any heirs she might have someday. Nothing outrageous, but enough for a nice home and some kind of educational trust. How much do you think that would take, Franklin? Why have you stopped writing? Franklin put down his pen and looked at me. Actually, stared at me is more accurate, as if he knew if I were someone he knew he'd met before, but whose name he couldn't quite recall. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. The pointed nature of his gaze was disconcerting. What? I asked, unable to stand the silence. Abigail, what happened to you? The holidays are just a week off. Have you had some sort of Ebenezer Scrooge epiphany? Have you been going around on midnight romps with the spirits of Christmas? I made a face. Ha, very funny, Franklin. He took off his glasses and wiped the lenses with his pocket handkerchief. I'm serious, Abigail. You've changed. For the better, I think, and markedly. When the rich finally meet the poor face to face, then poverty will cease to exist? You took that from Reverend Tucker's sermon 2 Sundays ago. I was in the back pew and you were in the fourth. You always sit in the back, Abigail, and you never attend except on big holidays. Is that what's going on here? Have you found God? Don't be stupid, Franklin, I snapped. I've always believed in God, and I've always gone to church. It's just that now, well, I've started attending more often, that's all. His amazement in the face of my generosity was insulting, as if I hadn't been giving away millions for years. Now, just because I wanted to give a bit more than I had been, he made it sound like I'd been hoarding my money for my own pleasure. Really, Franklin, you make me sound just awful. I'm sorry, Abby. He sounded sincere. I wasn't trying to offend you. I'm just trying to understand what has brought about this sudden change. You want to give away all your money? You want to remember Liza in your will? You're going to church and not only listening to the sermons, but actually quoting the minister? I watched you at service last Easter, Abby. You fell asleep in the pew and were startled awake when the Williams boy played the Gloria Patri on his trumpet. I remembered that. It was a terrible service. Why did they have to bring in trumpets just because it was Easter, when we had a perfectly good organ? Besides, the Williams boy has a tin ear. The whole thing was off-key. Next, Franklin said, you start volunteering at the shelter, working in the kitchen, getting your hands dirty in the trenches, and cooking and serving Thanksgiving dinner? Abigail, you don't cook. That's not so. I helped Evelyn Dixon make a turkey and a pie just a few weeks ago. It had turned out rather well, too. I wasn't there for dinner, of course. I hadn't told them where I was going, but just that I had a previous invitation. But Evelyn saved me a piece of the pie, and Liza said the turkey was very moist. And that's another thing. I called on Friday to see if you wanted to have dinner at the grill, and Hilda said you were at the quilt shop. Hilda again. When would she learn to keep a confidence? At your quilt circle. Quilt circle? Abby, you don't quilt. At least you never did before. Now you're spending every Friday night at Cobbled Court baking cookies with Evelyn Dixon or making quilts with Liza and that other woman. What's her name? Margo Matthews. He nodded. Margo. Abby, you haven't made a friend in 30 years. You barely tolerate your old friends. And now this? What is going on? I slapped my hands against the arms of the chair in exasperation, then got to my feet, gathering up my purse and my Cobbled Court project bag, and headed to the door. All right, I've changed. So what? I admit it. I've changed. I don't know why, Franklin, and frankly, I don't care. But whatever the reason, I like it. I was practically shouting. I feel better than I have in a long time. Is that all right with you? Franklin got to his feet. The puckish smile returned to his face. Yes, Abigail, perfectly all right. Hooray! I said, raising my hands heavenward as if addressing an invisible balcony of witnesses. We can all rest at ease. Franklin Spaulding approves. What a relief. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go. I am late for an open house. I shut the door behind me, nodding at Franklin's receptionist before heading down the stairs and onto Commerce Street. Outside, the sun was shining, but the air was cold. The sidewalk was dusted white, like it had been sprinkled with powdered sugar, evidence of a recent snow flurry. Clutches of holiday shoppers scurried along, carrying bags and leaving stencil-sharp footprints in the snow as they walked. I turned to the left, in the direction of cobbled court quilts. When I looked up, I could see Franklin watching me from the window of his second-story office and smiling. That was chapter 18. I'm going to get a drink. I know, alert the media, right? Chapter 19. Evelyn Dixon. It was a week until Christmas. I'd finished the applique tree skirt just in time. But that night, sitting on the floor of the apartment and sorting through the boxes of ornaments I hauled out of the storage closet, I suddenly didn't feel like putting up a tree anymore. We'd held our holiday open house in Quilton that day. Invitations had gone out to all our customers, inviting them to drop by for cocoa and cookies and to bring along any last-minute projects they wanted to work on before the holidays. Probably 100 people showed up, though, thank heaven, not all at once. The flow of guests was steady but manageable. We ran some in-store specials, but by the time we paid for invitations, postage, refreshments, and a small gift for everyone, a wrist pin cushion, I don't think we made any money. But that wasn't the point. I just wanted to do something to thank my regulars. It was a nice party. Margo, who knew that our improved sales still hadn't caught up with expenses, scolded me a little. The extra sales generated at the Quilt Pink Day were an unexpected boost, but it wasn't enough. No matter what we did to advertise, Cobbled Court's tucked-away location made it hard for people to find us. With Christmas fast approaching, the streets of New Bern were packed with shoppers, but only a fraction of them wandered into our courtyard. Margo was worried. If we had the new class listings ready, we could probably have registered 20 or 30 new students today. You said you'd have it ready a week ago. I know, I'm just having a hard time deciding what classes to offer. I'll get to it as soon as I can. I've just been a little overwhelmed, what with the holiday traffic and all. It was an excuse. Business had been better since Thanksgiving, especially on the weekends, but it was far from overwhelming. Most days, I manned the store myself with a little help from Liza, who had put together the most darling display in the bow front window. Using rolls of quilt batting for their bodies, she'd constructed a fluffy snowman family warming themselves around an icicle-festooned fireplace with a mound of snowballs where the logs should have been. In the corner, she'd tucked a little snow-flocked Christmas tree hung with clear white and blue and silver balls strung on white ribbons. She spent hours on that display. I think she really enjoyed doing it, and it certainly drew a lot of attention. In fact, the newspaper used a picture of it to accompany a story. New Bern merchants deck the halls, and credited Liza as the creator of, quote, one of the village's most charming holiday windows, ends quote. And they were right. Liza's display and the resulting story had brought some extra customers our way, but not in the numbers that would have kept me too busy to plan for next year's classes. Margo knew that as well as I did. I'm sorry, Margo said, and put an arm around me. I'm sure you're still not feeling 100% after the surgery. I don't mean to nag, but I hate to see you lose potential business. Don't apologize, you're right. I should have had it done by now. I'll get to it just as soon as I can. Really, I said, and then changed the subject. Do you know if we have any more of those chocolate macaroons in the back? They really went through them. No wonder people gain weight during holidays. I have this terrible feeling that I may sneeze in a second. If I do, I shall sneeze into my sleeve. No? Okay, I'm good. All right. I'll check to see what we've got left. Margo went into the break room, taking an empty cookie tray with her. I rang up a sale, assuring the disappointed customer that the new class schedule would be ready soon. Customers came and went all afternoon. Margo and Liza helped work the counter when things got busy, but we all had a chance to sit down with the rest of the customers and chat while we worked on our various projects. It was nice. Even Abigail dropped by to show me her nearly finished pinwheel quilt. The only thing she had left to do was sew on one side of the binding so it would be ready to give to Bethany at the women's shelter Christmas party the next day. When she spread it out on the work table, everyone put their projects aside and gathered around to see what Abigail had done. I think she was uncomfortable at first, finding herself at the center of a crowd of strangers, but quilters are never strangers for long. Once she'd relaxed and quit tearing out the blocks over and over, the quilt had come together fairly quickly. And while it wasn't perfectly sewn, it really was a lovely quilt. "I can't believe this is your first quilt. It's just gorgeous," Wendy Perkins exclaimed, pushing her rhinestone glasses higher on the bridge of her nose and leaning down for a closer look. "I love the colors you picked, all those blues and greens. It's cheerful but soothing at the same time. Wish I had your eye." Another woman who'd taken my Mariner's Compass class crowded in to have a look. "Look how well her points match. It's hard to believe that you're a beginner," the others murmured in agreement. "What's your secret?" Abigail thanked the woman, but assured her she didn't have a secret and turned the conversation around, asking her admirer about her own project. I'd noticed that Abigail always did that, deflected any conversation that centered on herself, so that without their even realizing it, she got the questioner to talk about herself instead. There was no more expert interviewer in the world than Abigail Burgess Wynne. She knew that almost everybody loves to talk about themselves. Not for the first time. I wondered what made her so hesitant to open up to other people. It simply didn't make sense. Recently, though, I felt that was changing. The other day, with only minimal prodding from me, she'd gone on for a good 10 minutes about her volunteer work at the shelter and Bethany, the little girl she was making the quilt for. A few minutes later, I looked up from my own work and saw Abigail carrying on a conversation with some of the other quilters and looking not precisely relaxed, but more comfortable than she had before. Like I said, quilters are never strangers for long. It had been a long day, but a successful one. When the afternoon light started fading, casting the dull rays of the setting sun through the bow front window and stretching the shadows of the fat snow people out of shape like pulled taffy, and everyone began collecting their things and heading home, I felt sad. I didn't want the night to come. Everyone had somewhere to go. Liza was going to the movies with a friend, and Margo had choir practice at the church. Since it looked like she was going to be in New Bern for a while, certainly till after the New Year's, when she said companies might start hiring again, she decided to join the church. As it was the last Saturday before Christmas, Abigail had a round of parties to attend. I would have liked to call Charlie and see if I could join him for dinner, but I knew he'd be too busy for that. Business at the grill was booming. The city dwellers who owned weekend places in New Bern opened them up for the holidays and brought lots of friends along to enjoy the snow-covered hills, the picturesque shops, and the antique homes bedecked in fresh evergreen wreaths and garlands with the poignant glow of a single candle in each window. At the end of a day of antiquing or shopping or sledding or skiing or just hanging around a cozy fireside, residents and visitors alike flocked to the grill on the green. Every table was full every night of the week. Even the regulars had to call in for reservations. And Charlie's catering business was going great guns, too. Abigail had a list of 6 parties she had to attend that evening, and the grill was catering 3 of them. I hadn't seen Charlie in weeks. He was so busy. He even had to put a temporary moratorium on our morning coffee dates. I counted up the till, locked the shop door, shut off the lights, went upstairs, and put a plate of leftovers in the microwave. Standing by the counter, waiting for the timer to go off, I sighed and said aloud, "Poor Evelyn, it's Christmas. Everyone has somewhere to go. Everyone but you. Poor you." The microwave timer dinged cheerily, and I pulled the plate of leftover kung pao chicken out of the oven. "This is ridiculous. Stop being such a baby. This is a perfect way to spend the evening. You got a nice warm house on a bitterly cold night, a nice big plate of your favorite Chinese food, and a whole evening to yourself. What's so bad?" I asked myself, and then, echoing one of my mother's favorite admonitions, "Life is what you make it. Quit feeling sorry for yourself." Thinking I had given myself good advice, I decided to have a little Christmas party of my own. After spending so much time and effort decorating the shop for the holiday, I had completely neglected my personal surroundings. No wonder I was feeling so blue. I put a CD in the stereo, a compilation of Christmas music that Garrett had burned for me when he was still in college, and listened to it while I ate. After washing my dishes, I started hauling out boxes marked Xmas decor out of the closet. It wasn't long before I realized that there was no way that my one bedroom, 700 square foot apartment was going to accommodate all the items that had previously decorated my three bedroom, 3,000 square foot home in Texas. Even if it could, there was no point in putting up so many decorations just a week before Christmas. I decided to limit myself to two: the ceramic nativity that belonged to my mother and a Christmas tree. I preferred fresh trees, but Rob had always insisted on a fake tree because he said real trees were too expensive and dropped too many needles. Besides, he'd say, every year, you can't tell the difference. The manufactured ones are better anyway. You'd never find a natural tree with a trunk that straight. He was right, and that was my point exactly. You'd never mistake a fake tree for a real one. They didn't look the same, and they certainly didn't smell the same. As far as I was concerned, the fragrant, resiny scent of pine was half the pleasure of putting up a Christmas tree. Still, even a fake tree was better than none at all. I pulled pieces of evergreen, quote, branches out of the box and assembled them into a 5-foot tree, noting wryly that there were a good many manufactured needles on the floor before I finished. After sweeping up the needles, I opened the boxes, unwrapping several layers of tissue-wrapped bulbs and ornaments, including one with a picture of Garrett beaming a toothless infant grin and the words, "Baby's First Christmas," until I found the strings of lights. They were tangled, of course. It took forever to unravel them. After I sorted through the mess, I wrapped each branch in lights, put on the ornaments, and then plugged in the tree, only to discover that 2 of the strings of lights didn't work. I muttered a few choice words under my breath. I should have checked them before putting them on the tree. The last time these lights had been used was 2 years ago, back when it was Rob's job to untangle the lights and check for burnt-out bulbs while I unwrapped ornaments and Garrett played DJ, making sure the music selection was sufficiently festive. 2 years back when we were a family. When everything seemed safe and certain, and the only change I could have imagined in our holiday traditions was that they would expand to include Garrett's someday wife and someday children, who would make our Christmases grow taller and wider and more splendid each year. Instead, Christmas was shrinking, from the 3 of us to just me. And next year? All day long, I had tried not to think beyond this day, to take Dr. Finney's advice and enjoy the holidays and not let my mind wander into the land of what's next, worrying about what would happen come January. Further testing had shown that there was cancer in both breasts. Given this news and the fact that the lumpectomy had failed to achieve clean margins, Dr. Finney now recommended that I undergo a double mastectomy. At her urging, and because I hoped she was wrong, I sought the opinions of 2 other surgeons. Both of them concurred with Dr. Finney's assessment. And so I agreed to the surgery, though not to the doctor's suggestion that I tell my family and friends about it, not until after the holidays at least. I was determined that Christmas should be as merry and as normal as possible, whatever that meant now. But suddenly, sitting cross-legged on the floor in a nest of tangled tree lights and discarded tissue paper like some lone, sickly bird abandoned by the rest of the flock, I was overcome by sadness, a loneliness that went to the bone. I was so tired. I didn't want to do this alone anymore. I couldn't. I had to talk to someone. I took one of the crumpled balls of tissue from the floor and used it to dry my eyes and nose before picking up the phone. I started to dial Margo, but then remembered she was at choir practice. Instead, I tried Garrett, first at the office and then on his cell phone, but he didn't answer either call, so I left a message. "Hi, honey, it's Mom. Hope you're doing well. I sent a box with your presents. It should be there by now, but don't open them until Christmas or you'll spoil the surprise." I paused for just a moment. Listen, honey, give me a call when you can. There's something I want to talk to you about, okay? Anyway, I'll hang up for now. Hope you're out doing something fun. Miss you, love you, bye. When I hung up, I felt even worse than before. Now that I had admitted the need to talk to someone, it was like I couldn't turn it off. I simply had to talk to someone, someone that someone I cared about and who cared about me. At the moment, that was a very short list, and everybody on it was unavailable. But suddenly I knew what I had to do. When I needed more than anything was to hear that honeyed Texas twang, dark and thick as praline syrup, and the laughter bubbling up like Dr. Pepper fizz poured into a tall glass. I picked up the phone again and dialed Mary Dow. A man's voice, deep and slow, careful to enunciate his words clearly, was on the other end of the line. Templeton residence, this is Howard speaking. Hey, Howard, I said unconsciously and immediately falling back into the friendly Texas mode of greeting. This is Evelyn Dixon. I haven't talked to you in a long time. How are you? Is your mama around? Hello, Evelyn. I'm fine. Mama and I are going to be on television. Here's Mama. It was nice talking to you. Have a good Christmas. And before I could ask any other questions, he put Mary Dell on the phone. Baby girl, she hooted in an enthusiastic greeting. How are you? Merry Christmas. I've been wanting to call, but we have been so busy with this book business and everything. You wouldn't believe it. It's funny, not 15 minutes ago, I was telling Howard that I should call you, but I figured you'd be out on a Saturday night, so I was going to try you tomorrow afternoon. Isn't that something? Your ears must have been burning. So how are you? She repeated enthusiastically. She sounded so happy, and it was so good to hear her voice, I couldn't bring myself to launch right away into my list of woes. Oh, I'm all right. What's this Howard was saying? Something about the two of you being on television? She laughed out loud. Yes, Evelyn, honey, can you believe it? That's why I haven't had time to call. I'm about as busy as a hound in flea season. She laughed again, and the sound of her delight rang through the receiver. Mary Dell, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Oh, I thought Howard told you. Evelyn, hold on to your hat. Somebody at a publishing house called up the folks at the House and Home Network and told them about the book. Next thing I know, some little skinny gal calling herself an assistant producer showed up on the doorstep with a cameraman and saying they wanted to shoot some test videos. Oh my gosh! Oh, Mary Dell! I put my hand over my open mouth, my own problems forgotten. I couldn't quite believe what I hoped she was about to tell me. Well, I just thought it was some kind of joke or something, so I told him, well, come on in. I gave him some coffee and banana pudding and let him come into the sewing room and film while Howard and I worked on a kaleidoscope quilt. Then they left, and I didn't hear a thing about it until a month ago when that little skinny gal, Heather's her name, she's in charge of producing a quilt show, but I swear I don't think she's ever done so much as thread a needle. Anyway, Heather calls and says they want to put us on television on our own show. Quintessential Quilting with Mary Dell and Howard. Can you believe it? Mary Dell screamed into the receiver, and I did too. For a moment, it was as if we were two high school girls giddy with the news that we had just both been elected prom queen. I was thrilled for her. Can you believe it? Finding out about the book was exciting enough, but this, baby girl, I'm about as happy as a clam at high tide. Mary Dell, this is just amazing. So what happens now? When will you be on the air? In the spring. Right now we're working on the concepts for the first 6 shows, but we'll start doing some actual filming right after the holidays. Evelyn, I'm so nervous. Howard is just taking it all in stride like he always figured he'd be a TV star someday and was just waiting for somebody to come along and point him in the direction of the camera. That little Heather just fell in love with him. You know, the way he pipes in with some little suggestion about how to place the block or how to look nicer with a brighter color. Well, Heather thought that was wonderful. Said she loved the mother and son interaction. In fact, they're going to give him his own 90-second segment every episode just to talk about color selections. They're going to call it Howard's Hints on Hues. Isn't that wonderful? Well, he always did have a great eye. Oh, Mary Dell, this is just such wonderful news. I could not be happier for both of you. Be sure to tell Howard I said so. I will. Of course, the only bad part is that life has gotten a little crazy. Until Heather called, I'd been planning on hopping in an airplane and coming your way for a visit, kind of a Christmas surprise. But now, of course, my euphoria faded. It would have been so wonderful to see her, and I realized that unconsciously that was exactly what I'd been hoping she would do. show up on my doorstep with her loud laughter and loud earrings and shake me out of the funk I'd fallen into. I was homesick, not for my old house or my old life, but for my old friend. Mary Dell was the best. And I knew that even now, with all she had to do to make this amazing dream of hers come true, if I had told her of my troubles, she'd figure out a way to drop everything and come see me. But that wouldn't do. Not when she was on the verge of something so important, at a moment when timing was everything. Mary Dell, don't worry about that, I said. I could not be happier for you. Once things calm down, we'll get together for a nice long visit. But you've got to tell me when the first show goes on the air. I'm going to have a premiere party and invite everyone I know. I laughed, and I've already figured out the perfect menu. Buffalo chicken wings, banana pudding, and Dr. Pepper. These New Englanders have never had food like that before. They won't know what hit them. They'll probably have indigestion for a week. Mary Dell hooted her pleasure, laughing at the thought of a bunch of Yankees, who she'd once assured me were so straight-laced they ate pizza with a knife and fork and a napkin tucked into their collars, eating chicken with their fingers and watching her on television. And barbecue and cheese straws, she howled. Oh, you gotta have cheese straws, baby girl. Say, she exclaimed, a new idea suddenly occurring to her. Why don't you come down here for the first taping? It'll be in late January sometime. I'd feel so much better if I knew you were in the audience. Late January. I knew what I'd be doing then, and it didn't include flying to Texas, but I couldn't tell Mary Dell that, not now. Oh, honey, I wish I could, but I racked my brain, searching for an excuse. I just can't. I'm scheduled to go to Rhode Island for a big quilt show then. I'm presenting some workshops, and, well, I just can't back out. It's such a great opportunity. The publicity, you understand. Oh, sure, she said, trying to convince me that she did indeed understand. The disappointment was evident in her voice. You can't miss a chance like that, not when you're starting out. I murmured a half-hearted agreement. But listen to me going on and about myself without even asking about you. How are things at the shop? And how are you feeling after the surgery? You must be all healed up if you're going to be teaching a big workshop in Rhode Island. Oh, yes, much better. Everything's fine. Couldn't be better. That is chapter 19. You get a bonus chapter today. I'm going to read chapter 20 as well. I hope we're all having fun, guys. All right, we ready? Chapter 20, Abigail Burgess Wynne. She loved it, I replied, answering Evelyn's inquiry. Absolutely loved it. I laid out my purchases, 2 yards of a novelty fabric covered with grinning pirates climbing the masts of ships with bright red sails that floated on a sea of brilliant blue, plus another yard of pieces of 8 companion fabric, and 4 fat quarters of complementary accent fabrics in reds and blues. You should have seen her eyes when she opened the package. She threw it around her shoulders like a cape and wouldn't take it off. That's wonderful, Abigail. I'm so glad. Evelyn smiled sincerely, but her eyes looked tired. I wondered if she was getting enough sleep. Undoubtedly, the final run-up to Christmas was wearing her out. I reached for a spool of blue thread and added it to the pile for Evelyn to ring up. So am I. Somehow, I think it made her feel special, and not just Bethany. I had a board meeting at the shelter this morning and saw Bethany's mother, Ivy, in the hall. She thanked me over and over again and said that no one had ever gone to that kind of trouble for her little girl before. Do you know she actually had tears in her eyes? The program director told me that Ivy doesn't have any living family. Isn't that sad? Anyway, that made me think I wanted to make another quilt for Bethany's little brother, Bobby. Can't say I'm too enthused about the pirate theme, but he seems to be crazy about them, so a pirate quilt it shall be. You were right, Evelyn. When you give someone a quilt, they know you care. I told you. Evelyn smiled as she put everything in one of the red and white checked cobbled court quilt shopping bags. That'll be $46.28. I opened my wallet and fished out 3 $20 bills. The front doorbell jingled cheerfully, signaling the arrival of another customer. Margo came into the shop, and there were tears in her eyes. Before we could ask what was wrong, she launched into a barrage of questions. Evelyn, why did you do that? And where did you get the money? What were you thinking? I've seen your books. You can't afford this, and I won't accept it. Margo, what are you talking about? Slow down. Evelyn frowned and handed her a tissue from the box that she kept behind the counter. Margo blew her nose. You know what I'm talking about. Don't try to pretend you don't. The deposit. Evelyn and I both looked at her blankly. At the bank, I went online to check my balance last night, and there was an extra $5,380 in my account. And when I went in today to tell them that they'd made some kind of a mistake, the teller said that there was no mistake, that someone had deposited the money into my account in cash. So there's no way to find out for certain who did it, but I know it was you. Margo trumpeted her into her tissue again. I've told you before, Evelyn. I help you here in the shop because I like doing it. I won't take your money. You can't afford it, she scolded. Evelyn shook her head. Margo, look at me. Quit crying and look at me. I didn't put that money into your account. I swear I didn't. I wish I could have, because you certainly deserve it. I will admit, I have written you a check, and one for Liza, too, that I'm planning on giving you along with your Christmas presents. She held up a hand to silence Margot's tearful protests. No, now don't argue with me about it. You're going to take it, and that's that, but don't get too excited. I promise you there are very few zeros on the check I wrote. I wish there were, but you're right, I can't afford it. Well then, who made that deposit? I have to give it back. It's too much. I can't accept it. Why not? I asked. It's Christmas. Are you too old to believe in Santa Claus? Yes, Margo cried and broke into a fresh wave of tears. Evelyn came around the counter and put her arm around Margot's shoulders. Come on now, she soothed. You haven't worked in months. Heaven knows you must need the money. Maybe that's it. Maybe heaven does know. Maybe you've got an angel walking around the streets of New Bern, just like I do. An angel, just like you've been to me. Oh, Evelyn, it was you. I knew it. Margo began sobbing. Her skin became all blotchy and her face turned a truly unattractive shade of red. You see, that is another reason not to give in to emotional displays. They make you look simply awful. I shot Evelyn a look and began gathering up my things. This whole drama was making me feel very uncomfortable. Evelyn nodded silently, letting me know that it was all right to leave. She knew how I hated this sort of thing. Really, Margo, it wasn't me, I swear, Evelyn promised, as she patted Margot's heaving shoulders. Why are you crying? This is good news, isn't it? Why are you so sad? I'm not sad, she wailed. I'm just so happy and relieved. I am exactly $4,380 behind on my bills, and I've just been frantic trying to think how I was going to pay them, and now this. Whoever made that deposit knew exactly how much I needed and gave me an extra $1,000 besides. How could they have known? If it wasn't you, Evelyn, who was it? Margo threw her arms around Evelyn's shoulders and simply gave herself up to an absolute tsunami of weeping. With Margot's back now turned, I rolled my eyes at Evelyn, who shot me a disapproving frown and waved farewell. I'm late for my hairdresser, I said. Have to run. And the quilt circle on Friday? Evelyn asked, still comforting the weeping Margo. I know it's Christmas Eve, but you're still coming, aren't you? I'll be there. Better to spend the evening with the whole group than alone with Liza. At least I'll have you to referee. Evelyn grinned and waved between back pats. She knew that things between Liza and me, while not exactly a picture of familial harmony, had definitely improved. Helping out at the quilt shop seemed to have bettered her mood and attitude considerably. I suppose everyone feels happier when they have somewhere to go and something to do. Her holiday window display really was charming. While I still found some of her artwork to be, well, avant-garde would be a kind way of putting it, she obviously had talent. Perhaps, after her court-imposed sojourn with me was complete, she would give art school another try. I made a mental note to discuss it with her after the holidays. Taking my leave of Evelyn and Margo, I made a loop around the counter toward the front door, past the desk where Margo kept file folders for income, expenses, inventory, tax receipts, and one marked, Margo, personal. If a person was a nosy snoop, they could have opened that file and see exactly how dire Margo's financial situation had become since she'd lost her job. But on the other hand, they probably wouldn't have to do that. While meticulous about business, Margo was sometimes careless about her personal affairs. She had a bad habit of leaving files open on the desk where just anyone might read them. That is the end of chapter 20, my darlings. I hope you are having a really good day and will continue to have a good day. I will see you here tomorrow. That was a long one. My throat's tired. I have another little bit for you from the book of Philippians, chapter 4. This has been on my mind today. Are you ready? Verses 11 through 13. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. All right, my darling friends, I will see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful and blessed day. And you know what? If you're feeling sad today, and I know that some of you are, I get that. Here is the antidote for sadness. Try to figure out how to do something to help somebody else. I swear it'll work. All right, I'll see you next time.